Okay, so Pirkei Avos Mishnah Vav. In the middle of the Mishnah, discussing the 10 things that were created on Erev Shabbos Bein Hashmashos. So the Mefarshim say that in the creation, as the days went on, what was created on a later day is more chashuv, has more of a chashivas. So as my mother says, I think she was mechaber to a couple of Mefarshim, that Chava was created after Adam. That would seem to imply that the women are on a higher level, which the truth is, that's not really a controversial statement because they don't wear tefillin, they don't have bris milah. A boy is born, he's not finished yet. You have to finish him off. I don't mean that in that sense. I mean that he has to be completed, and that's by bris milah. A woman is born already, and she's complete. And it's not stam, we're throwing a token to the feminists when we say that a man has to wear tefillin. A man has to put on tzitzis and daven with a minyan. He needs that in order to attain the spiritual level that he is meant to attain, whereas the women don't need those outside stimuli, if you will, to get them close to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. So it makes sense with what we know from Chazal. That being said, in our Mishnah here, so Bein HaShmashos already is after Adam and Chava. So would that imply that these 10 things are like on a higher level? I mean, these are inanimate objects. I think except for two. One or two, or three actually. We'll see. We'll review it again. They're pretty much inanimate. They're not Bali Bechira. They're all animals and maybe Mazikin. So that's a thought. We also mentioned last week that it's Bein HaShmashos. Bein HaShmashos for us is that period of time in between Shkia and Seis HaKerchav. So that's called Bein HaShmashos, which is a twilight. That is, it's a suffix if it's day, it's a suffix if it's night. So we all stop doing malacha before Shkia. I mean, there's different Shkias. Even the Hasidim, who in Europe, and maybe even some today, I don't know, but definitely in Europe, they did malacha after what we call Shkia. After the sun dropped below the horizon, they were still doing malacha on Erev Shabbos. That's because they held of a later Shkia. So everyone agrees conceptually and even practically that at Shkia, one can no longer do malacha. There's a machlokes. Is Shkia when the sun actually sets, or does it happen around 59 and a half minutes later? That's the machlokes. But the concept everyone agrees with, that between Shkia and Seis HaKerchavim, that's Safek Yom, Safek Laila. So if Hashem is creating things, Bein HaShmashos, so he's creating things on Safek Shabbos. So Hashem didn't create anything on Shabbos except for rest. According to one Mahalach and Rashi, Hashem created rest on Shabbos. But how do we understand the Mishnah? So I'm not sure if we mentioned this last week. If we didn't mention this last week, you could say that for Hashem there's no suffix. One approach, that the standard approach of Bein HaShmashos is there's some point in time between Shkia and Seis where the day actually turns into night. Let's take it 13 and a half minutes as the basic understanding. No one does malach at 13 and a half minutes after Shkia, but on paper that seems to be what the Goyim held. That it's 13 and a half minutes from Shkia till Seis. So at some point in time, the day actually changes. And obviously, Ein Sveka Klapi Shmai, Hashem, there's no Svekas by Hashem. Hashem knows when that is. So when it says that they were made in Bein HaShmashos, that's from our perception. But from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem made it in the daytime of Bein HaShmashos. So let's say, I'm just going to throw out a number off my head. 7 minutes, about halfway, 7 minutes. The first 7 minutes, let's say, Klap Yishmaya, or the first 3 minutes, Klap Yishmaya is still daytime, so that's when Hashem made these 10 things. That's what we could say to answer this question. Okay. So what are they? Just quickly to run through them again. We have the Pi Haaretz, we have the mouth that opened up to swallow up Koirach V'Hadassai. We have the Pi HaBe'er, the well that the Yidden drank from in the desert. Rabbeinu Yona says it's the Sela that Moshe Rabbeinu hit. We have the Pi HaOsoin, the mouth of the donkey that spoke to Bilam. The Keshes, the rainbow, which is the what reminds us that we're Chas V'Shalom, we're worthy of another flood. The Mun, which is a positive thing, that was the nace, the bread falling from the sky when the Yidden were in the desert. The Mater, Moshe Rabbeinu's staff, with which he did many things. The 10 Makkahs, he split the seas with them, so they performed miracles. The Shamir is that little worm, that worm-like thing that they use to cut the stones to the Beis HaMikdash. There's a halacha, you can't use iron in the construction of the Beis HaMikdash. How are they going to cut these stones? So they used this, the Shamir. Then we have the Ksav, the Michtav, and the Luchos. 8, 9, and 10. The Ksav is the actual Gufa Oisis, the letters of the Torah. The Rabbeinu, that's Rashi. Rabbeinu himself actually is the Torah itself. The Michtav are the letters on the Luchos, and the Luchos themselves. So all these things were created by the Shmoshes. Then the Mishnah says, some say even the Mazikin, even we'll see actually in Brachas today, on Davav, we get into the Mazikin, they are demons. The Kadosh Baruch Hu made the world, and in the world he made demons as well. These demons caused sorrows for people, especially for Yidden, especially for Talmidei Chachamim. So these Mazikin also were created on Erev Shabbos Bein HaShmoshes, Ukvurasai Shel Moshe. The place where Moshe Rabbeinu was buried, that place was also created on Erev Shabbos Bein HaShmoshes. Now, l'cha'ira, Hashem created everything, like the land and the water and the tree, all that was set up already up by day 3, like everything was set up as far as physically the world. And day 4 also, I guess, with 5, but 5 and 6 already with the creations, the animals and the different things. So the Kurasa Shel Moshe, that place, I guess should have existed really on day 1, day 2, when Hashem, put the water into the oceans and the land was there. That's pretty much. So I'm not sure what it means when it says that the Kurasa Shel Moshe, his burial place, was created by Hashmoshes. Maybe Hashem fashioned the mountain in a little cave where it was going to be, like that specific thing. But everything else was like a miracle, right? Everything else, the rock that gives forth water, that mouth of the donkey, the rainbow, you could also say was somewhat miraculous in that it's only shown when we deserve something. So it is a miraculous thing. The man, all these things, the mata, which perform, the staff, which perform miracles. But the Kurasa Shel Moshe, it's just a place. I mean, not just a place, but it's the place where he was buried. It's not miraculous. It wasn't miraculous. What was the need to create it during Bein HaShmoshes of Erev Shabbos? Not sure. The Eilush Shel Avon Avinu. So some say these 3 things: the Mazikin, the place of Moshe Rabbeinu's his burial place, and the Ayil, the ram that ended up being the korban instead of Yitzchak, also was created on Bein HaShmoshes Erev Shabbos. We can ask the same question again. What was the need to have that? This would be a miracle that it lasted from Adam HaRishon all the way down 10 generations to Avon Avinu. So again, that wasn't necessarily a miraculous thing. That was just a regular sheep. That was definitely was a miracle that a punk ran when he was about to shecht Yitzchak and he got stuck in the greenery, the shrubbery. But that it had to be created out of Shabbos Bein HaShmoshes. Not sure why. Another Yesh Oimrim, the Yesh Oimrim. This is like a fascinating thing that you needed tongues. Whenever you fashion metal, right? So you have to have tongues to hold the piece of metal in the fire, and then it gets red hot, and then you take it out and you can fashion it, I guess, with the tongues also. You can't touch it. You throw it into cold water, it bubbles up, and then it gets hard. So this whole Gemara in Pesachim, Daf Nun Daled, that discusses how did they make the first set of tongues. Because you need tongues to make tongues, right? It's tzeves, it's tzvas, it's tzvas asuya. Tongues are made by tongues. So the original tongues, says this Yesh Oimrim, was created Erev Shabbos Bein HaShmoshes, which also is an interesting, somewhat quote unquote mundane type of thing. But that's the Yesh Oimrim. So in total, there are 14 things. There are 10 things that everyone agrees on. Then there's the Yesh Oimrim that adds 3, and the second Yesh Oimrim adds another 3. So we saw the Rabbeinu Yona on each one of these 14 things. And he finishes off, V'lama hutzrach limnois asar dvar mein. So he asks, what's the point of listing all these 10 things? We understand, now this is adding to Rabbeinu Yona, we understand the other Mishnayos in this parak that are 10. So Mishnah will do a quick review. With 10 mamaris, with 10 sayings, Hashem created the world. That we understand. There's a lot to learn from there. 10 generations from Adam to Noach, and from Noach to Avram. Mishnah itself gives us the lesson there to teach us how much schar Avraham Avinu got, and how much the Mishnah says Hashem endured the generations that were machisin, uvoim, the patience, the erech apayim that Hashem has, which is appropriate to emphasize during Elul, that Hashem waited all the basically 20 generations, 10 generations until Noach, and another 10 generations until Avram Avinu. Hashem waited patiently while people were sinning. How long do we wait? If someone does something wrong to me, how long do I wait to lash back at him? HaKadosh Baruch Hu can wait 10 generations. Then the 10 Nisyonis, Mishnah Gimel, that Avram Avinu went through, the 10, we'll call them trials, tests, that Hashem subjected Avram Avinu to. Again, the Mishnah itself says, to show us the love that Hashem had towards Avram, and that Avram had towards Hashem, teaches us what an Eved Ne'eman is, what a trustworthy servant is. Then we got into the miracles that Hashem did for us in Mitzrayim, and the Makkos, and then to Mitzrayim, and the 10 times we tested Hashem in the desert. These are all, the lessons are obvious and also not so obvious, but we understand why the Mishnayos are teaching this to us. The miracles that happened in the Beis HaMikdash was the previous Mishnah. Frek der Rabbeinu Yona, we come to Mishnah Vav. There are 10 things created Erev Shabbos Bein Hashmashos. Like what the Pia also, the donkey speaking, and the worm for the Beis HaMikdash, why is that relevant for us? What's the lesson to be learned from these 10 things? Answers the Rabbeinu Yona, L'hidia ki ma shebara Kodesh Baruch Hu al t'nai b'ra'im. What Hashem created was on condition. What does that mean, it's on condition? Sheishtane tivam b'shar tzricha. It was that the teva would change at the time that it needed, which means that b'derech klal, the earth doesn't just open up and swallow up people. The Medrash, Chazal tell us, the Medrash says that when they tried to run away, Korach and his chevra, when they tried to run away, so the ground became like on a slant, on a slope, and they rolled down into the Piaretz, every one of them. The donkey, right? When it just opened its mouth out of nowhere, thousands of years later when Bilam was on the scene. No, all these things were created, the abilities were created all the way back in Sheish Mebreshis to be used at a time that's needed. Says the Rabbeinu Yona, She'ein davar hamischadish ba'olam shloi ol b'machshav v'ma'aseh breshis. There's nothing that was created, nothing new happens in the world that wasn't already created back in the 6 days of creation. When the stars and the moon and the sun were put into the sky on the 4th day of creation, so it was decreed then, they were given the ability then, that when Yeshua needed it, Chizkiyahu HaMelech needed the sun to stand in the sky and not to move, it wasn't a miracle. Hayom shetibaku lifnei Yisrael, the sea to split for the Yidden, v'chein kula. Right, so what the Mishnah is teaching us is that all these miracles that happened, they're all not in this. We're not breaking nature, and a davar chadash, a new thing, is being nischadash now. These are all things that existed. HaKadosh Baruch Hu planned everything from the beginning. There was nothing that, in our 6,000 years of existence, that's what we're heading towards, nothing had to happen new. Everything was already gecheshbin. Everything was calculated, everything already from then. So this is not just these 10 things. Every miracle that happens was created, every physical thing was created back then. These 10 were all b'machshava, whatever that means exactly, but I'll just translate the words. It came into Hashem's mind. The thought happened Erev Shabbos Ben Hashmashos. U'v'kol yesh ben shinui teva. And all these things is what's called a shinui teva. A shinui teva means a change in nature. But what the Mishnah is telling us is that there was never a change in nature. Nature never changed. The ability was already there from the beginning of creation. So I guess that the idea is the completeness of creation, that no stone was left unturned. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is obviously omniscient, omnipotent, so everything was gecheshbon, everything was clear, and there's ein kol chadash tachas hashemesh. My grandfather used to always say, ein kol chadash tachas hashemesh. There's nothing new under the sun. You know, there was a Rav in the Mir Yeshiva, a Rebbe, and he used to say that they call it the news, right? You call it the olds. Nothing changes. You know, there's a murder here, there's this happened, this thing. Like, it's pretty much the olds. It's just names change, but pretty much the same thing. So that's the lesson of the Mishnah, that already from the beginning, you know, we get nervous sometimes with things that are happening, rightfully so, in the world. But when we read this Mishnah in the Survey Yona, we see that no, everything already was planned from way back when. You know, so HaKadosh Baruch was in control, and he's pushing everything the way it should be going. So it's somewhat of a comforting thought. We shall hold here and pick up with Mishnah Zayin Be'ez Hashem next week.
Thank you, Rabbi.